Welcome to Somerset Stories. I'm your host, Kathy Pickar. This is the second in a series of shows where we're interviewing our elected officials. We hope that these shows not only inform and hopefully entertain you, but we hope that they will carry the past into the future when Somerset celebrates its bicentennial. Our guest today is Marnie Shaul, who is on the council of the town of Somerset, and we're happy to have her here. Welcome, Marnie.
Thanks, Kathy.
You know, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about when I was looking at your CV, and I've known you for a long time, but you are, I think people don't realize that you have a PhD in economics. And your undergraduate degree, however, you had a BA in chemistry with honors, I might add. And what was it that you switched from chemistry and then you went into economics?
I had been a chemist for 3 years at the New England Center Hospitals, and when I moved to Ohio with my former husband, I was interested in politics, and I thought, in government, and I thought that you really needed to understand economics to make good decisions. Little did I know that that was probably not correct, but at the time it seemed to make sense to me. So I started going to school part-time to learn about economics, and I just sort of stayed on and wound up getting a master's, and then I got a PhD.
And you are from Ohio, is that correct?
No, actually I'm from Wisconsin. My former husband's political base was Akron, so after he finished law school, we moved to Akron, Ohio.
So you started your government work in Ohio. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, actually, if you think about my government-related career, it actually goes back to the University of Wisconsin, which was a very active political environment and very different from the suburban area I grew up in. And I think I just sort of carried that spirit with me. But in Ohio, I first was involved with my former husband's campaign for council at large in Akron. And then I got involved in politics in Ohio and began working with somebody who became lieutenant governor and then eventually became governor. And I was appointed to a role in his sub-cabinet.
Oh, and so I was looking at some of the articles you wrote while you wrote these articles. Well, I think you've published a lot, but a couple of them in particular. One had to do with women in government, and it was an international assessment.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I was working for the Kettering Foundation at the time. Kettering is based in Dayton, Ohio. And there was an international women's meeting, and I did a paper for that meeting. And the paper was a comparison of women's participation in government around the world. And actually, the United States was not a leader at the time.
That's interesting.
That was written some time ago, but many other countries had higher rates of participation by women in local government and to some extent in national government as well.
I believe that article, if I remember, was from the early 80s, for about 1984. Was there any reason in particular that, did the article get into of why there were fewer women in the United States as opposed to what country did the best? Do you remember?
Well, I think the Scandinavian countries generally did fairly well, but even some places in what we would call the developing world had higher rates of participation. I think the article was really more looking at numbers rather than the reasons why.
Right. Oh, interesting. You joined the council in Somerset in 2007, and I had the pleasure of serving with you for a few years, so everybody has to know that I think you are the glue of the council, and from my perspective, the town. And what has changed in your perspectives of governing in our little town from the time that you first started to now? Has anything changed in your view of governing?
I think that things have actually changed somewhat substantially, although, you know, it's a gradual process. But you may remember about the time I started, we were still as a community in a long conversation about whether to do improvements at the pool house or in the town hall, and people had very strong views on various sides of those issues. And it took us a long time to resolve those issues. I think over time we've become more participatory. The council, I think, is very involved in important issues like the budget. And I think that over time, we've professionalized to some extent how we do things. A better process for contracting and checking out bidders and just the kinds of business things that local government does. I think we're doing, each year we do a little bit better at how we do it. We're a very small place. We don't have a big professional staff. And so we, I think, are incrementally reaching our goals of being a first-class professional community on all fronts.
It's interesting that we have a small staff. I always feel that we could have a larger staff. And on the flip side of that, I hear people say, well, what is there to do in managing the town? And what do you think, in terms of our manager or your position on the council, what do you think is some of the most time-consuming aspects of managing the town?
I think the pool house, which is a very popular and important community building asset, takes a lot of time for managing. It needs capital improvements every year of some sort, and then we have to have a staff on board every summer, and there are contracts supporting the managers for the pool in terms of pest control and there's security. There's a lot going on with that. And then I think we've had a lot going on with the Washington WSSC, the Washington Sanitary Sewer Commission, with projects. There's been a project that was supposed to start for years.
Can you tell us a little bit about that project and why that project exists? That project started when I was on the council, so this is a few years. A few years back.
That's right. The WSSC was under a consent decree where it had to make improvements in sensitive environmental areas because it was essentially dumping raw sewage into streams.
And that's what we have in Somerset. We have a stream.
We have a stream. We have, and over the years, the flow of water has gotten stronger. It's eroded the banks. Manhole covers are now, that piping system is now way above ground. It used to be below ground. Some of the pipes are sitting in the stream bed where you can see them, and there's raw sewage coming out into the stream. But to get agreement about how to do this, it's going to be a pretty intrusive project. Trees will have to be cut down, major equipment, because not only are they replacing the pipes, but they're also doing some stream repair. So they have to bring in big rocks, big trucks to bring the big rocks in to put along the edge of the stream. And to get agreement from town residents about what the routes would be and how it would be done, that was a very timely process. We had a lot of public meetings about it.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, so that people could comment and changes could be made. We've involved our arborists to protect the trees. And then, of course, given it's been such a long period of time, WSSC has had project managers leave, contractors go. So they've had staff changes too. But they are supposed to be starting in June.
And this does include some stream restoration as well.
Yes, that is actually the biggest part of the project in terms of why they have to take down so many trees. The pipes don't require as big equipment to come in, but the big boulder-sized rocks require trucks.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. And one of the other things that are involved in managing a town, I know people, I've also heard people say, particularly when I was on the council, Somerset must be flush with money, and we are lucky in that our government is not strapped at looking at health care, and we're not managing a police force and things like. But what are some of the civic things that we manage that do cost the money, and that we have taxing authority on at least on the property tax, right? Where does a lot of that money go? Obviously, the pool. I think our pool is expensive.
That's correct. Somerset is actually very fortunate as a small community to have the kinds of recreational assets we have. Not only do we have the pool, but we also have tennis courts, which we recently redid, and you were involved with that. That was a substantial investment for us. We also have something in the neighborhood of 20 acres of parkland, some of which is cared for more like your lawns with plantings and grass, and some of which is woodland, which we try to improve by removing invasives and protecting in that fashion. So that's one set of things we spend money on. Another set is actually the town staff and consultants. So we, as you said, we have a small staff, 3 maintenance workers, town manager, and a assistant to the town manager. But we also have, because we're a small place, we have consultants because we don't need them full time. We have an arborist, we have a building inspector, we have a building plans person, we have a town attorney. And then from time to time we'll hire other consultants as needed for specific projects.
I remember we always had the ongoing bet going about snow and snow removal and what to put in the budget. But the roads are particularly expensive to maintain properly.
That's correct.
And the curbs, I was always surprised, the curbs almost cost as much as the road in terms of maintaining it.
In terms of linear feet, the curbs are actually more expensive than the roads to put in. But it's important to try and do them at the same time because you have to dig in to put them in. So one of the things I think we've professionalized in the town is having a longer term capital budget so that we're looking at what's the condition of our roads and when do we need to resurface the roads, when do we need to put in new curbs. And also other capital improvements. When do we need a roof on the town hall, on the garage, those kinds of things.
How far out in the timeline does the government plan? Or do they have a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan? How do we manage that?
We have a 5-year plan which is actually published in the spring along with the proposal for the 1-year budget. The council actually passes the 1-year budget. The 5-year plan is just sort of a policy document. It's meant to be sort of a roadmap looking forward to alert people to when we might do things. Probably from a road perspective, we might want to look at a 10-year budget. And one of the things our manager has proposed is getting a pavement management company in to actually look at the condition of every road in Somerset and make recommendations about when they need to be redone.
Has that always existed? When you first joined the council, was there a plan of looking into the future care of our assets, the town's assets?
There may have been in someone's mind some idea, but I didn't ever see anything in writing. And one of the first things I worked on was a 5-year plan.
Oh, interesting.
And it was kind of guesswork for me, but I was trying to do it. We did ask Larry Plummer, who was one of our consultants, to do something on roads, but we didn't really have a careful way of knowing about the quality of every asset. Right. We now have a town report that's been done by a consultant.
Oh, that's good. Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
And we're out.
You got plans?
You bet. $50 million Americans struggle with hunger, but we can do something about it.
Excuse me.
What's going on?
Dinner. Please join me in helping put food on their tables. Together, we can feed America.
You guys keep going. I'm gonna get the plates.
Wait!
Find your local food bank at feedingamerica.org/hunger.
Welcome back to Somerset Stories. Our guest today is a member of the Somerset Town Council and the Vice President of the Council, Marnie Shaul. Marnie, before we took that break, we were talking about planning documents. Can you tell me a little bit, you started telling me about a document that was created to help Somerset look forward and plan in maintaining its assets.
Yes. Well, when I first started on the council, I actually had to learn how to use Excel in order to be able to create a 5-year plan. So I did my best to gather information, and we have ever since been building on a 5-year plan. And residents can see that in the I believe it's the April issue of the Journal. There's an insert that has the 5-year plan, and it looks at all the different capital items we might need to spend money on and lays it out over time. Now, each year we may learn different things, and so we'll be updating it. But generally, it gives us a roadmap to know when things might happen. One of the things, though, that we don't know is how long the pool will last. When we did the pool house renovation, we did look at the pool pipes, and at that time they were in good shape. We opened the deck up, and we looked at the pipes where the deck was opened up when we did that renovation. But our pool is 40 to 45 years old.
It was in the 70s,
yes.
I believe, is when it was built, yeah.
And pool life is like 40 to 50 years. So we just don't know how long the pool will last. So that's a big outstanding item that we can't really budget for in a particular year. That may be one of the reasons why we have a rainy day fund.
Can you imagine if the pool is the central point of the community for several months of the year? Can you imagine if we had to close the pool down?
Yes.
Oh, the pool doesn't work anymore. I don't know how that would
be terrible
go.
because you're
Yeah.
right. It really is the center of activity in Somerset in the summertime.
Yeah. You mentioned the rainy day fund. What is our rainy day fund? Can you explain that just a little bit?
Yes, every year we're setting aside some money. We would like to actually get to close to a year's worth of operating expenses set aside in the bank. And some people say, oh, that's an awful lot. But Kathy, you were on the council when we went through the economic downturn.
That was hard.
That was very hard because we found out in the middle of the year that our income tax revenues were going to drop by 50%. And there was no way we could cut enough things in the budget to stay within budget. We actually had to dip into savings that year.
Right, I remember.
And then the following year was also a very, very lean year. And so we want to have the kind of cushion if something really unexpected happens where we won't have to go running to a bank and try and borrow money.
Right. When we talked about the difficulty in that year and we created the rainy day fund, you also mentioned that our revenue dropped by 50% from income tax. Can you tell us a little bit more about the government revenues that Somerset receives as being a municipality?
The two major sources of funding that Somerset gets are the income tax and property tax. Somerset has control over property tax rates, and right now it's 0.1 per $100 worth of assessed value.
You know, I want to get back to the broader question, but a lot of people don't understand that. When we say remember when I was on the council and we said we were going through that rough period and we did have to raise the tax rate. I think it went from 0.06 to 0.08.
Or it might have been even 0.04 to 0.08, I think.
Oh, we actually doubled it.
We may have doubled it.
And when people hear the taxes are going up, of course, it's difficult. It is. And we have people in Somerset who are on fixed incomes and just retirement incomes. So anytime you hear a tax raise, but it's a very small portion of the property tax that we pay.
That's right. The county gets the lion's share of the property tax that you pay. There's also a state share. So if you get your tax bill as opposed to having it go to the bank and the bank paying it, you can see that this amount that goes to Somerset is a very small number.
Right. So when we go from, say, 0.08 to 0.1, right? That's what we've done.
I think that's about $40,000 or $50,000 in revenue spread out over
400 homes.
More than 400 homes, yes.
So we would be talking about how much per household.
Is that about $100 a household?
Right. So I think that's important for people to understand. I mean, even when I would hear, oh, the tax is going up, it does create a little bit of a panic. But when you realize that when we raise our tax rate, it's a very, very small portion of what you already pay
in property taxes.
In property taxes. On the income tax level,
we don't have any control over how much income tax money we get, other than attracting high-income earners to Somerset.
Right. Right. No, if we lose one high-income earner, we can feel it in the budget.
We can.
Because we're just such a small town, and that's leads to a lot of interesting scenarios.
That's right. The way the income tax works is there's a couple of ways we would get the money, but I think the most common is that Somerset gets 17% of what its residents pay the county. When you get,
Okay.
when there's the state tax, there's a county income tax, and then Somerset gets a portion of what's paid to the county by its own residents. And one of the reasons we wanted to raise the property tax is because it's a stable source of revenue. Home prices aren't fluctuating by huge amounts in Somerset, so it's a pretty steady source. The income tax, on the other hand, is a very variable source of income. We talked about the economic downturn, but it's also true if you had people who either had very large capital losses or capital gains in a particular year, that could greatly change your income tax revenues in that particular year, and we have no way of predicting that.
Oh, interesting. That is interesting. The another thing that we emphasize in Somerset, I think it started becoming more apparent when I was on the council, is transparency. I mean, we're a microcosm of what we want good government to be at the national level, right? So we want transparency. What are some of the ways that our town has worked toward more transparency since you've been on the council?
One of the things we do is we have budget work sessions so that anybody can come sit in on those. The council and all the council members are engaged in the budget. It's not just something that drops from the sky close to the time it needs to get passed, but we start working on the budget probably in February. We may have open meetings in February and March. We don't. We encourage people to come, but those are work sessions for the council, and generally we try and talk mainly among ourselves, and then we have public hearings on the budget where anybody can testify as to how they feel about it. So that's one thing. I think we try and get information out to residents as much in advance as possible so that they know what's on the agenda, so that if it's important to them, they can come to the meeting. People lead busy lives, though, so it's hard to always make sure people are alerted. And life moves much faster than when I first came on the council, when you think about how communication has changed.
How is, I know this year's elections, I heard someone say that they thought that no one voted who's under the age of 55. And that's a problem, to try to engage the younger families coming into the community, engage them in the government. Have we come up with any ways in particular that we want to reach out to those people?
I don't know. I have done some conversations, but the problem is that in that age group, oftentimes both parents are working.
Right.
Their kids have got a million activities after school, on the weekends. And as long as folks seem to be somewhat satisfied with how their town is operating and how their government is working for them, I think they feel like, well, you know, maybe I can wait to do things in the town until I've got a few fewer responsibilities. We do have good participation at the events, I think, the summer kickoff party.
Correct, yes.
The various other town-sponsored events, the 4th of July. So I think we may not be engaging people so much in the government of the town, but in the community of the town.
Which may be even more important. You know, I know the swim team, when my daughters were young, and they were on the swim team from really tiny little things until they graduated from high school. And that was a center of community for younger families. So even though we weren't directly involved with the government, it certainly, the town, which sponsored the swim team, was supporting community activities through that.
And also, I think there are committees that are more focused. For example, the swim team committee and the swimming pool committee, where there are younger households engaged in the committee part of government as opposed to being elected officials.
How does the council interact with the committees?
Each committee has at least one council liaison and sometimes an alternate or a second council person. And the council people try to come to each of the committee meetings and provide information or carry ideas back to the council from the committee and kind of help guide them in how to be good recommenders to the town council on things that the council should be considering. We really take very seriously the work of our committees. We've got wonderful volunteer support.
Right.
On
What
the committees.
committee are you the liaison to? Or committees, I think, in your
Yeah.
case.
Well, all of Somerset's committee meetings are open to the public, so anybody can go to any committee meeting, and they are publicized. But the ones that I tend to go to, the Environment Committee, which I actually helped found when I was first on the council, and I was up until very recently the alternate on the Parks and Natural Resources Committee, so I've gone to many of their meetings and probably will still continue to go, but I've just joined the Communications Committee.
Oh, great.
So,
And what are some of the projects
on the
of
Tennis Committee, too.
Oh, great. Oh, good for you. What are some of the projects of the Environment Committee, for example?
Well, I think they've had some major successes, as you know, in things like getting the town to compost. That was a huge step forward.
Right.
We have about a quarter of the town at least now composting, and I think we're proud of that. We continue to have as a goal reducing the amount of stuff we're sending to the landfill, and we're making some progress there. They're also looking at stormwater management and ways to encourage individuals in town to help better manage stormwater, and maybe doing some examples. The Parks Committee and the Environment Committee often work closely together, and I think they're going to be working on like a rain garden near the tennis courts as a
nice.
demonstration to the community about how you can do improving stormwater management.
And of course, the county has a great program that they might be able to interact with, the Rainscapes program.
Although the county's Rainscapes program, I think, is limited to private residences,
Oh,
like
is it?
yours and mine.
Right.
We've
Yes.
both done that,
Yes.
that program. The other thing I'd like to work on, and I've been working with the Environment Committee on, is improving lighting in Somerset. We have some areas where the sidewalks and roads are pretty dark at night. And it's a little controversial because people have different opinions about how much light you should have. But
Is there anything in Somerset that isn't controversial? Yeah.
I think hardly anything.
Yeah, I
maybe
think
not.
so.
Maybe not the non-engineerian's ice cream social.
Oh, good, good. Oh, I'm so glad. But the street lighting is, I can see where that could be controversial because there are people who want to low lights, they don't want to contribute to light pollution.
Exactly.
And then the people, we can't see the sidewalks.
Exactly.
So it's difficult.
And then plus we also have to figure out how to work with Pepco on this because they're Pepco-owned poles.
Well, that's a whole nother program or several programs in itself, right?
Yes, you know all about that.
Yes. But the lighting is interesting because it really was, our street lights are that. They are street lights. They are not necessarily sidewalk lights. So they're placed above, and when the summer comes around, the tree canopy, it is difficult to see the sidewalk in certain places. But to put the lights where we can see them on the sidewalks is just a huge expense.
Yes, I'd like to see, we are actually looking at a proposal from a consultant to see whether we could get some ideas about how to do better lighting.
Yeah.
But actually the lighting is so dim from some of our street lights that even though the canopy may be an issue, the lights themselves are more.
Yeah, okay. Marnie, we could sit here and talk all day. I'd enjoy talking with you about everything, but particularly the town and its government.
Thank you, Kathy. Me too.
So thank you for joining us with Somerset Stories, and we'll look forward to seeing you in our next show.